What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing. The Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series will continue its conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. Now, the photo that you're looking at is the old Madison Square Garden. It was located on Madison Avenue between 26th and 27th Street in Manhattan, and that's how it got its name, as Madison Square Garden. But it was a long story to the history of this building. As a place of diversion, the garden goes back to 1870, when the old passenger station of New York Central in Harlem was a Harlem River Steam Railroad. It was abandoned in favor of the 42nd Street and Madison Avenue Depot. Now, the station was first turned into a car barn, and then it was leased by Frank Canetti's Hippodrome, which was replaced by a barn-like building that housed Patrick Gilmore's band. It was a concert and also for the P.T. Barnum Circus. Eventually, what would happen, it would turn into the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. And you would have circus acts there and horse shows and dog shows there for quite some time. The structure was first named as Gilmore Gardens and would be changed to Barnum's Hippodrome. Now, William K. Vanderbilt would purchase the ground, primarily to house the horse shows. And on Memorial Day evenings, May 30th, 1879, he officially changed the name to Madison Square Garden. Now, on June 6, 1890, the new arena was opened up, and it served as a meeting place for sports pastimes and national meetings of all kinds. But May 4th, 1925, and this is very interesting because Madison Square Garden would then be on its way with some great fights in boxing history. It closed its doors and it made room for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Building, which currently stands today. Barnum had a garden at the rental of $5,000 a year. That's what his cost was for the building that he was renting. And it made handsome profit, actually, but went in $500,000. But then $5 million, it made handsome profits and a new garden in Stanford White design that took the place of the structure and became steadily user for Tex Ricker. Tex Ricker was a promoter who knew how to make money. He was a con man in one hand, but he was a brilliant promoter in the other hand. And he realized that the new garden had to have like a roof, some type of a dome, because they kept getting lightning strikes and they had to change their venues, or they would have to change the dates based on the weather. So he was very brilliant in terms of knowing how to market his new gold mine, if you will. And do you know the first fighter who would fight at the Madison Square Garden would be George Dixon. George Dixon would be the first fighter to fight there. He fought and met a fighter by the name of Billy Plymore. And this was in 1890. George Dixon, if you don't know quite who he is, he's a milestone because he was the first athlete to win a title overseas. And I'm talking anywhere. The first athlete. He was from Canada. He was a black man. He would take the title from Luke Wallace. And I go through all that in my previous videos if you search back. But he would win the title several times. And he would have 25 title defenses or 26 title defenses as a featherweight. Now, Dixon would engage in 34 world championship contests. He won a bantamweight title, challenged it twice, and defended it twice. But he won a featherweight championship title 3 times and challenged once and defended it 25 times. That's tied with Joe Louis, 25 heavyweight title defenses within a 12-year reign, 11 and a half months. George Dixon was a phenomenal fighter. He would discover shadowboxing and many, many other things. When you go through my videos, you'll learn more about George Dixon. But he was the first fighter to actually fight in New York's Madison Square Garden. Now, the Hawthorne Law kept a lot of fighters back from fighting at New York's Madison Square Garden. But in 1920, Jimmy Walker, who was a very good mayor in New York, would pass a bill, the Walker Law. It was basically established after the AEF, America's Expeditionary Forces, in 1919. And the first fighter to fight under the Walker Law was Joe Willing and Johnny Dundee. But the first heavyweight championship title match that happened in 1920 under the Walker Law was Jack Dempsey and Bill Brennan. But in 1925, the first contest that took place will take place, I believe it was November 11th, 1925, and that was Jack Delaney and Bergenbash. This was under Tex Rickard promotion. Now, when Mike Jacobs came along in Madison Square Garden, the very first fight that he would have would be with Peter Cerrone, who was the featherweight champion, took his title from Freddie Miller, and Henry Armstrong. And that contest took place in October of 1937. And Henry Armstrong, after defeating Peter Cerrone, would become the first Black American featherweight champion in boxing history, and he would be the second Black fighter to win a title in New York's Madison Square Garden. The first one was Tiger Flowers when he defeated Harry Greb, 1926 at Madison Square Garden. The third fighter, Black fighter, to win a title in Madison Square Garden would be Ray Robinson, and he would defeat Tommy Bell, December 20th, 1946. But Madison Square Garden has a great history. I've seen so many bouts in Madison Square Garden. When you fought at Madison Square Garden, you knew you've made it. So many great fights that took place in the Garden. Joe Louis's first Madison Square Garden fight, his debut, was against Primo Carnera. And he would defeat him in 6 rounds, knocking him out, breaking his ankle because of the way he would fall. But Joe Louis, he was just a remarkable fighter. But most of the greats at some point or another, including Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson and others, they would have fights at Madison Square Garden. And it just shows you. I was at the Terry Norris and Ray Leonard fight. I was in the second row when he fought at Madison Square Garden against Terry Norris. And he would hang up the gloves after that. He said, enough is enough. He got the business handed to him. But there's so many stories. The New York Golden Gloves was held in Madison Square Garden, the finals. I've seen so many great fights. So let's just take a look at a couple of fighters who fought in New York's Madison Square Garden. And one quick side note, the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus got it started at Madison Square Garden because Barnum, he would link up with Ringo, and they would begin the circus there because Madison Square Garden was known to have horse shows and dog shows, and then the circus. And it was a place to be. It was a huge, huge building. Now, you had 4 different buildings. The last one now is on 34th Street and 32nd Street. It coincides with the post office between 7th Avenue and 8th Avenue. And I was at so many great Madison Square Garden events. I remember watching Michael Dokes and Donovan Razor Ruddock. When Ruddock would land a smash to the chin of Michael Dokes, Dokes was out for about 11 and a half minutes. As a matter of fact, I didn't know that Michael Dokes woke up until I got home because everyone left the arena. And when we left the arena, obviously, there was no internet during that time. So you didn't find out until you got home and you watched the news and you realized Dokes was okay. But he was out the entire time when everyone was leaving the arena. It was fascinating. I saw Kevin Kelly when he fought Prince Nassim Hamed. On the undercard of that fight was Junior Jones and Kenny McKinley. My God, so many great fights at Madison Square Garden. I was at the Garden when Roberto Duran took it to Davey Moore. It was on Duran's birthday. And he would win the title, the Junior Middleweight Championship title. It was, like I said, it was on his birthday. It was in the undercard. Well, it was the main event, and you had the Risco Collins fight was a lot of controversy. Panama Lewis allegedly took the padding out of the glove, and Risco and Resco, I should say, and Panama Lewis did time. I think they did 2 years for that. And eventually, Collins would commit suicide. Unfortunate, but that was on the undercard of the Davey Moore and Roberto Duran fight, Madison Square Garden. But you had so many great fights at the Garden. And I actually have, if I can pull it out real quick, I can show you. If not, if you zoom through my past videos, I've done, because I have a scrapbook, 2 big scrapbooks of every fighter who ever fought at New York's Madison Square Garden, not missing one fighter. And what they are, they're the inserts of the programs. You would get those programs from Madison Square Garden when you went to see the fights. And they would have all the fighters, current and past, in those programs. So my dad and I cut out all the images and we placed them in these scrapbooks. And I have 2 thick books of every fighter who ever fought in Madison Square Garden up until, I would say, the 1970s. Now, I have programs, over 100 programs of Madison Square Garden fights. As a matter of fact, I have the Ray Robinson, when he was on the undercard of Fritzy Zivic and Henry Armstrong, October 4th, 1940. I have that program. I have the Ray Robinson and Tommy Bell program at Madison Square Garden, December 20th, 1946. But Madison Square Garden was just a place to be. Just the fact that you were there, it made it all worthwhile. So yes, December 11th of 1925 would be the first title match between Paul Berlenbach and Jack Delaney. And that was Tex Rickard's promotion. And then eventually you would have Michael Jacobs. That was in 1937. And that first championship fight there was Henry Armstrong. And that was his first actual fight that he promoted. First promotion under the Garden. Because he couldn't get the Garden. Jimmy Johnson had the Garden. And 20th Century Fox belonged to Mike Jacobs. He eventually was able to get the Garden, and that was his first World Championship match. It was actually his first match, but it turned out to be a championship match, and that was Henry Armstrong and Petey Cerrone. That was October of 37. And from that point on, Jacobs had some great championship fights there as well. Here's an image of Mike Jacobs. He was the promoter of Joe Louis. Just wanted to show you Mike Jacobs. And he was the promoter, Madison Square Garden, 20th Century Fox. I'm just going to browse through one of my personal scrapbooks just to give you an idea of some of the fighters who fought at Madison Square Garden. This wasn't the book I was going to show you. I just can't get a hold of that book right now. Like I said, I have over 1,000 scrapbooks. And to get, pull out all those books to get one book, sometimes so I'll just show you this one. Now I have about 15 books that I pulled out. Remember, each book that I have, every scrapbook I have in my collection are 1,000 pages each, 2,000 front and back. So they're very heavy books. But I pulled out four books I have here. And I'm just giving you an idea of some of the fighters who fought at Madison Square Garden. I'm just showing you the images. I'm not even getting to any details of these fighters at the point. I'll do that in a separate video. But just scanning around just to show you how some of these fighters looked. And they fought in Madison Square Garden. Now this is a very special book here. This is mostly 1923, 1924 images of fighters. These are some very good fighters. A lot of them are club fighters. A lot of them are very, very good fighters as well during the course of their time in the game of pugilism. All right, some Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series, stating all great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Be well. Peace. So one last thing, do yourself a favor and hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. The more likes I get, the more it's going to benefit you because you'll see images in a clearer fashion and some images you've never seen before in your life. But I'm not going to do that until I start getting a little bit more respect on the channel. And you can do it. Just take the time to hit the like button. All right, take care, peace.